All right, everyone, welcome to our webinar, an overview of cyber liability insurance. Before we begin, let's go over some basic housekeeping. We're sensitive about your time and are aiming to bring this in around 45 to 50 minutes. Depending on the Q&A, we'll definitely bring it in by noon. While your individual phone lines are muted, if you have any questions, just click on the raise hand icon, type in your question, and we'll do our best to address it quickly. So that said, let me introduce you to today's speakers and give you a little background about us. Craig Pollock is the founder and CEO of FPA. He's been in the industry implementing solutions and managing technology for small to mid-sized businesses for over 25 years now. His background is in business systems development, specifically application development for accounting and financial systems. While Craig started out as a programmer, he's become a technology advocate, building FPA into one of the most respected IT service providers in LA. While running FPA, he also acts as an outsourced CIO or CTO for a number of our clients. His knowledge and experience is one of the key reasons FPA specializes in the investment advisor, CPA, and manufacturer and distributor vertical markets. He's active in the industry, speaks at industry events, and has a number of published articles. Justin Reinmuth is the founder and CEO of the Technology Risk Underwriting Group, as well as the president of McCormick and Reinmuth Insurance Agency. With over 2,500 businesses currently insured, Justin is an expert in the area of cyber insurance, including cyber liability, cyber breach, and cyber crime coverage. Now, to give you a little background about FPA. We've been in business for over 25 years and have about 25 staff. We have our own dedicated network operations center, NOC, where we run and secure our clients' networks from. One of our mantras is business before technology. To us, this means we focus on the business aspect of the value proposition technology brings to our clients' businesses. It's not about technology for technology's sake. We really believe in our core values, and core value number one is simple: take care of the client. We believe that if we're doing this, everything else will fall into place. And lastly, we truly believe that IT has been shortchanged for far too long. To us, IT the way it's supposed to be means delivering high quality, timely, and cost-effective IT services for our clients. This may seem like a marketing tagline, but we really do believe our clients should expect more, and we should deliver on this promise. Now I'm going to turn it over to our presenters to get our webinar started.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. That was a great intro. And thanks, Justin, for joining us. We feel like this is a pretty big coup to have you here.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is going to be this will be good. This will be fun. As fun as, cyber insurance can be, but I think, it's a fun topic and hopefully informative for our clients. So we should be able to provide some good knowledge and good value here.
Absolutely.
So initially, I just wanted to go through a couple things, and we'll go about this. This is going to be a little different to some degree than some of our other webinars, where for those of you attending, this is really going to be an informative discussion between myself and Justin, and hopefully questions brought to the table by you guys. So a number of our clients and contacts and friends have emailed us questions over the last couple of weeks that they were looking to get answered. So we've kind of corralled them and put them into the presentation today, but not so much as a presentation, but more as questions and discussion items, and really to pick Justin's brain and hopefully, share some of his knowledge and experience through the years of what he's brought to the table, and help, you guys with this question around cybersecurity and cybersecurity insurance and how that kind of fits into your whole protection plan. So just to start things off real quick, some of the things that we want to cover and what we hope that you'll take away from today is, what your exposure is, what the different types of losses could be, different types of policies, what they cover, what in a quote-unquote appropriate level of coverage looks like these days, and that runs the gamut. And I think, a lot of what Justin's going to bring to the table is not so much, here's an answer, here's what you do, it's black and white. It's more, really, it depends on the situation. I think a lot of the answers that we're going to get today is it depends, right? Is that kind of the landscape, Justin, that you're seeing out there? Is it really depends on your business, on your risk aversion, all those sorts of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you've got, high target industries, right? If you're talking about healthcare and professional services, those are the two most breached sectors. And then you might have, maybe areas that, and when I say higher, high target areas, those industries tend to have a lot of PHI, which is protected health information, and PII, which is personally identifiable information. And, if all your clients are in California, California is a very stringent state on, getting notification out very quickly and following the letter of the law. If you don't, there's big fines and penalties that you're subject to. But we have other clients that will take out these cyber policies that maybe aren't as targeted industries just because they don't contain as much PHI or PII, but they'll want to take it because they've had a friend of a manufacturing company or a bakery that has been subject to some sort of cyber crime. And that's important because more and more you're seeing the statistics now. I was just reading an article last week that talked about some of these cyber attacks in the near future will rival the loss of a hurricane. Another industry trade organization had told me when they were speaking that in the last 30 years what the carriers have paid out in property and casualty claims, and half the time they're going to pay out in cyber claims. So cyber insurance anymore, because so much of our business is done online and stuff like that, it's just a necessity to have in your insurance portfolio anymore these days.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think hopefully we'll answer a lot of the questions to help people understand how, not only how it fits in, but really what are the right things to look for, and how to optimize basically what the policies cover, and really have the correct sort of protection. So lastly, in terms of what we'll learn today is hopefully what what the technology footprint underwriters are looking for these days, and obviously the more stable and stringent and secure your infrastructure is, I'm not going to necessarily go out on a limb and say the lower your premium is going to be, but the better policy that you'll get, and potentially the lower the premium. And I think as the industry matures, and I think again this is something that Justin will share with us, is as this industry matures, we'll find that, right, the better protected people are, the better quality insurance, and hopefully the lower the premiums will be. So hopefully we can share that information with you today. So to start with, right, we just want to talk about just what the environment is out there, and basically, what's going on. I think most people nowadays understand that cyber threats are on the rise, that security risk is increased, social engineering is more successful than ever, right? And, with all the breaches that are going on over the last, X number of years, like more and more information is ending up on the dark web, that makes breaches that much easier. And so, that's kind of the landscape that we're living in these days. And it's not the good old days of, nobody wants my information, I'm just a small company. That has nothing to do with it anymore. So, these days there's so much going on in the industry, and this is not just, big companies, not just enterprise, Fortune 1000 or Fortune 500 companies. These are small to mid-sized businesses, and these are the size clients that we work with, and these are the size clients and businesses that Justin sees on a day-to-day basis. So, Justin, could you add anything to that in terms of what you're seeing in the SMB market in terms of insurance coverage and security issues?
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded to on this slide, ransomware, is a big one. So I don't know if people understand what ransomware is, but basically what that is somebody would click on a link that they're not supposed to, and then they, their systems would be shut down. It's kind of like kidnap and ransom. So the enterprise that gets into your system will demand some sort of money, because usually it's what we call a military grade encryption. So there's only one key that can unlock it. And so to get that key, they might demand $20,000 or $30,000. So that's been, kind of at the forefront of claims that we've seen over the last 2 years. But the cyber crime portion has really taken over. I mean, I can tell you, one of the carriers that does about 8% of the cyber market might not sound like a lot, but the next closest is 1%. So they're kind of the Nike of the shoe industry. But they were telling me that their cyber claims are up close to 100% from last year. So that's really where things are trending is, your clients are getting tricked into sending money. And it could be, we've seen situations where vendors of the clients on this call, they have had their emails compromised and hacked into. So you could receive a legitimate email that asks you to wire X amount of money to to this particular client, and somebody has taken over their email, and it's kind of tough to prevent those type of things. We've seen also claims where people are going on researching and looking on LinkedIn and seeing who some of your employees are that might be new, and they might go kind of pick on them because they're much more likely to maybe not recognize that email or get tricked into sending money. So the cyber crime portion, not in a good way, is really taken off. We've seen a lot of claims in that industry. So I always tell our clients with cyber claim, you're looking at when somebody's going to come pick on your cherry tree. Probably not are they going to come pick, because at some point somebody's going to come and they're going to go after you, and you just got to be protected.
Yeah, and we see this time and time again with clients and prospects to different degrees in terms of how much protection they have in terms of the layers of security, whether it's their firewall, intrusion protection, dual factor, internet threat protection, with Umbrella, even with SIM monitoring tools. I mean, we can put in all of these different layers, and the goal is to make it as hard as possible. And then somebody clicks on something, and the next thing you know, right, they're hit. And so I think that the beauty of this whole conversation is, right, we want to do as much as possible. We want to make it as difficult as possible. And we want these guys who are doing this sort of stuff, if we make it as hard as possible, they're going to go on to somebody who's easier. But at the end of the day, if it still happens, and like you said, it's more of a when, not an if, your business is protected. And that's the whole point of the cyber liability insurance and getting that together. So diving in, now that we know this is kind of the driver and this is the environment that we're dealing with, let's start off with, why do you need cyber liability insurance, right? What are kind of the drivers, and what does it mean, and how does that all work? And then I've got a list of questions that we'll go through, but Justin, if you can chime in here. I know that you like to talk about things in terms of the 3 pillars of why, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, again, we'll find clients that come to us, large law firms, large medical practices. We've got a $1 billion food company. They will come to us for one of 3 reasons. The first group or pillar will take out insurance because they have a ton of PHI or PII, again, protected health information. So it could be, medical records, things like that. And then personally identifiable information, which is social security numbers, driver's license. Again, in the state of California, I think an email address and another unique identifier equals PII. So, there's obligations under the state of California. If that information is compromised, you have to notify people. I think it's like in 3 to 5 days. Then you have to provide credit monitoring. You might have to hire a forensic expert to investigate why the breach or how the breach occurred. You might be subject to a regulatory fine or penalty. So you want to make sure that you've got coverage to hire the proper, regulatory attorney. So there's just a myriad of things. When one domino falls, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 behind it that also fall. So, you're going to want to make sure that you carry out cyber liability, to comply with the laws there in California. The other group will take it out for, much like Amazon relies on their systems to generate revenue. A lot of companies, if go in and try to unplug your computers and see how well you can work, it probably won't work too well. So if you're subject to some sort of, hack, or somebody gets in and corrupts your data, if you have any downtime, I mean, a lot of the people on the call are going to carry, business insurance for, if you have business income due to a fire or wind or something like that. Well, you're going to want to have a cyber policy that covers business interruption coverage if you're subject to a hack and your systems are shut down. So we've seen clients that have been unable to operate from anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. So, I don't know on this call what what you're making per day, but if you're down for 4 weeks, it's a lot of money. So most clients would want to be compensated for that. And again, if your data is corrupted, you're going to want to make sure there's a cost to go in and re-input that data and reproduce that data. And then, we kind of touched upon the cyber extortion where, if you get hit with some sort of, ransomware and your systems are locked up and shut down, you're probably going to pay the bad guy so you can get that data back. So, that's kind of the second reason that people take out cyber liability. And then the last reason is that cyber crime. Right now we're just seeing a ton of people that are getting tricked in. And I've been, Craig, on calls with clients that took out these policies that'll say it'll never happen to me, and it happened to them. And we can see, we've seen these aren't, I'm not giving you statistics that I read. We've seen claims anywhere from, a couple $1,000s to we had one client that got tricked. It was a manufacturing company for $35 million. And that one was bad. I mean, the bank shut off. They wouldn't talk to him. The FBI was called in and things like that. So, you want to have a cyber liability policy for those three reasons: to protect sensitive data. If your systems go down and you lose business income because of that, you'll want to take it out. And then cyber crime. If you get tricked into sending money, if there's some sort of unauthorized electronic funds transfer and money's taken out of your account, then you'll want to be compensated for that. And if people have VoIP systems, we have seen where the VoIP systems have been hacked into, and then all of a sudden the client's stuck with like a $35,000 bill for unauthorized calls. That would be another reason it would kind of fall in line with the cyber crime.
Great. So definitely, three different reasons of why, and I think all of these are important components to drive, making sure that you're well protected. So, based on these questions that I've gotten from our clients and whatnot, I'd really like to drill down into this and answer, hopefully get the answers from you that we can share with our attendees here. So one of the questions that somebody had was, do you need a standalone cyber policy? So is that different? Like, are there things that are covered and not covered? We can talk about, that's a couple of questions that we have too, but, is there special about having a specific cyber policy versus, thinking in your general insurance, it should cover this stuff? Like what's there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of carriers now will include a little bit of cyber, like on a business insurance policy, or sometimes they'll address it, if you're a professional services, like, obviously we're insurance agencies. So on our professional liability, they might try to address it. A medical malpractice policy might address it. Those policies might take kind of a stab at it. But in order, again, in my opinion right now, to get a comprehensive, full, first-party cyber liability policy with the cyber crime portion, it limits that you're going to need if something does go wrong. You've got to take out a standalone, its own separate policy. It's going to be the only way to truly address that need. And again, if you're going to save money on things like auto insurance or workers' comp. Those are, I'm going to use the word regulated type of policies, but it doesn't matter whether, if you've got a 3-year-old Honda in your organization and that car's in an accident, it doesn't matter what carrier you're with, they're going to give you the value of the 3-year-old Honda. And same with workers' comp policies. I mean, you can shop rates and different carriers will have different rates for the class code, and you can save money on that. But when it comes to cyber liability, I guess if there's one thing you want to take away from this, is it's really an unregulated product. So some carriers might cover regulatory fines and penalties, some won't. Some carriers might cover forensic, some won't. Some might cover cyber crime, some won't. Some might have a certain exclusion, another might not. So you really got to get with somebody that specializes and does this day in and day out so that they can properly guide you in purchasing the correct policy.
Okay. So, you kind of touched on it a little bit just now, but I think, what does cyber liability insurance cover, and what doesn't it cover? So, and just as an example, like you just said, for general policies, it might not cover cyber crime, right? And I think, to a lay person and to a lay business owner, they tend to think, well, it's all related to cyber, and if there's a cyber rider on my general policy, then everything's covered, so I'm cool.
Right, and usually, again, those business policies, they might address it for $25,000 or $50,000, but if you're a medical office, and you've got 5,000 unique social security numbers, and let's just call it, $50 a pop to notify people and monitor their credit. You're all of a sudden looking at $250,000 claim. So 25 grand isn't going to get you anything. So making sure that you carry, the proper limits, and usually a standalone cyber policy will start at $1 million, is kind of the base point. And, you're going to want to make sure that, you carry that standalone cyber just because it's going to give you higher limits. But again, we call it insuring agreements, but a standalone cyber policy is going to address a myriad of coverages, whereas like if it's added onto your business insurance policy, it's only going to cover maybe, 6/10 of what a standalone cyber policy. So, you really got to, go and purchase a standalone policy. And, the other thing you got to just be careful is just pay attention to some of the exclusions. I know a lot of people on the call aren't going to take the time to understand that, but that's why you want to get with somebody. There's a case out in California where it's a healthcare provider. They had gone through an application process with the carrier, and on the application, they had told the carrier that we will audit our third-party vendors one time a year. So anyone that works with Microsoft would have to audit Microsoft, which is never going to happen. And then they also said, hey, listen, if we're running a certain version of antivirus or a certain version of firewall and the next version comes out, then we'll upgrade that immediately. Well, and you understand this, Craig, it's just not possible. Sometimes for various reasons, manufacturers will tell you, wait 2 weeks, right? Because sometimes downloading the next version can actually do more harm than good. But anyways, they had, there was an exclusion in the policy that said if you don't go, if you aren't auditing these vendors one time a year and you aren't going to the next version, then we're not going to pay the claim. And so they're denying a $4.1 million claim. So, like I said, if you're not paying attention, and you're not buying the right policy and not getting with someone that does this day in and day out, you could sometimes get into a little bit of trouble.
Cool. So one of the other questions, I know we're going to touch on this in a second, I believe, the insurance agreements, but what are the different types of policies? And we can touch on that in a second. But I think, what you alluded to with this being an unregulated sort of industry is like, do you have any pointers of what people should look for in the agent, that's delivering this sort of product? You've been doing years and years and years, which is awesome. But, a lot of people have just their sort of general insurance guy, and they're going to go ask him to add something. And, are there, sort of specific things that you can help people vet their agents with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, if you look at someone's website, or if you just ask them, like, how many cyber policies have you written? Those are going to be important, because I don't care what industry it is. If you take a doctor, we all go see a general practitioner. But if we got a heart problem, we get sent over to a cardiologist, because the cardiologist, he just knows more. He does this day in and day out. And, that's true with insurance agents. If most agents out there are generalists, right? So they're insuring a manufacturer policy. And then on the next call, they're taking a call from a bakery. And then the next call, they're insuring your home and your auto. Again, I don't care what industry it is, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. You can't be all things to all people. And if you're required to, see a specialist in the medical industry, you go over and see a specialist. And the same's true in insurance. You want to get with somebody that just specializes, that does this day in and day out, because, a lot of these cyber policies can be 30, 40, 50 pages. And, a general agent is not going to take the time to, sit there and read through, 3 or 4 of the top carriers' policies. They just don't have the time to do it. So, getting somebody with specialized, I think you'll find a lot of that stuff on a website, right? If you look at the website, and if it speaks, hey, we do a lot of different things, I probably wouldn't go down that avenue. I would get with somebody that says, hey, listen, we specialize in doing this, and we, this is what we do all day, every day. And those are the type of agents or agencies that you want to look for.
Okay, great information. Thank you. Are there any specific gotchas to look out for? Are there things that, you mentioned being aware of, like, auditing third-party companies and having some sort of reasonableness factor around that. Are there certain gotchas to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, all policies are going to have exclusions. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a cyber policy, a general liability policy, or workers' comp policy. They're all going to have exclusions. But, there's some exclusions you can live with and some exclusions you can't live with. I mean, I know I was working on a cyber policy for a bank, and they wanted to, it was a credit union, and I think they had like 7 or 8 locations, and they wanted to remove the electrical mechanical disturbances. So I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Ice or wind can take down the power lines, not on a regular basis, but it does happen, especially during the winter. And so they wanted that policy removed because the danger was if all of a sudden AEP, the local power company, comes out and re-engages the power, if for some reason the antivirus or the firewall doesn't kick in, then they didn't want that exclusion to be there. Well, the carrier wasn't willing to, remove that exclusion just because the policy, I don't know, was 40 or 50 grand. You kind of got the sense that if they were going to spend 200 grand, the carrier might be willing to look at that. But that was a situation where we took that exclusion and said, okay, what can we do internally to make sure that if this does happen, we got the correct practices and procedures in place, to catch this. So again, some exclusions you just aren't going to be able to, remove just because the carrier is going to say, hey, for the amount of money, we're not going to sit on that liability. But I think as long as you're having a conversation with your agent or the agency that's providing the quote and you're going through these things, then I think on your side, you can do some things to mitigate that risk. And the other thing is maybe, a carrier A might have that exclusion, but carrier B might not have that exclusion. So it's really going to come down to the agent to point out, what these are and, whether or not you can live with them.
Yeah. Cool. So here's one of those black and white versus gray questions, right? And people ask me this all the time, and I'm certainly no expert in cyber liability insurance, but how much coverage should we have? So what are you seeing out there? I mean, I'm sure there is no blanket answer, but what are you seeing that seems to be reasonable cost and reasonable coverage, and what are people sort of leaning towards, or what are the claims looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I think for our clients that have a lot of sensitive information, right, it's just going through and trying to say, hey, how many unique identifiers or unique records, if they were exposed, would we be sitting on? And then coming out to, some sort of number for that. So, if we feel like that we've got, 10,000 unique records or identifiers, and there's going to be a claim in between notify them and the potential lawsuits, we might set that level at $2 or $3 million. Again, if we're talking to a client that's really worried, hey, listen, our IT systems are the lifeline of this company. If this system goes down, for each day that it's down, we're down $40,000, right? Then we're going to address the business interruption coverage and make sure that they've got enough coverage. And again, the practices and procedures on the cyber crime portion, what is it, would be the maximum amount that you might wire or transfer, and setting the default to that number. So I'm not going to dodge this question really, but it really is by a case-by-case basis because, we'll talk to 10 clients during the day and we'll have 7 clients that, will address things differently. You might have 3 that there's some commonality and they're all worried about the same thing, but, we'll have 7 clients that'll come to us and they're all worried about different things. So, I would say if you don't have a cyber policy today, starting off at $1 million is $1 million that you have more that you have today than you had yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great stuff. So one of the questions that we talked about, which was like, what are the different sorts of pieces of a policy and what do they cover? So, I think you and I talked about this also. It's like there's all these different agreements, quote unquote, and I know that's the language of the insurance industry. But just at a high level, I mean, I think we want to make sure that our clients are well protected, right, and have an understanding that there's a broad scope to cyber, but yet at the same time, right, insurance is a risk-reward game, right, and so they need to make sure that the policies have the right coverage, and have the right pieces, right?
Yeah, and I think that this screen right here, this is, I don't want to call it a checklist, right, but those are some good insuring agreements that you would want included in the policy. The only other one that you might add is what we call media liability. It's for libel, slander, defamation, copyright, trademark infringement. Again, depending on what industry you're in, some industries get tagged more for those type of claims, and others, maybe not so much. The media liability is really going to depend on I don't know, kind of your social media presence. We've seen a lot of, kind of libel, slander, defamation type lawsuits. But, what you have in front of you plus the media liability would be, at the bare minimum, what I would want, because that list that you have here is a pretty comprehensive list. So you did a good job putting that together.
Right. So you mentioned the media liability, and I think that's an interesting component because a lot of people don't think about this, but right, as business owners, we're responsible from a legal aspect, right, around social media of our staff. And if people say anything, whether they're on the clock or not, that could come back to haunt us as business owners, right?
Yeah, I mean, years ago there's an insuring agreement. There's coverage on your general liability that's called personal and advertising injury, and that used to be picked up. But when the carriers were writing these policies, they might have only been setting aside $40 for that line of coverage. There just wasn't, the exposure that there is today. So now with between Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these social media outlets and how much people rely on it for advertising and things like that, the carriers have now gone back in and a large majority, if not all of them, will now exclude that coverage. And it'll still say personal and advertising injury, but then they put an exclusion in the back and say, hey, listen, if this is, brought to us via some sort of social media outlet or something that you posted, we're going to deny the claim. So they're punting that coverage over to the cyber liability carriers.
Right. Which is great to know, right? I mean, this is what we need to do here, is make sure that the cyber is protecting all aspects of the business that it's supposed to be. So lastly, we have this, what we call the best practices. And again, you and I talked about this, but and this may be a pretty comprehensive list, but what is your take on how policies are written from a cyber perspective as it relates to people's technology and how they run it, right? And meaning, is there a difference between, hey, this is a really secure network versus, hey, this is, not secure, or it's just kind of unmanaged and, anything's possible. Right?
I think that, this is kind of an ever-changing thing. So, what you're doing today to qualify for a policy changed from what was required 3 years ago, and it will change 3 years from now. But this list, a lot of times the carriers will have an expectation. In order to get this policy, you have to have A, B, C, D, and E in place. And so if you don't have those things, either A, you don't get the coverage, or B, they'll assign a debit because they'll deem you as high risk. I believe this is true in my business. The two things that I'll overspend on is our phone systems and our IT systems, because if we aren't up and running and I can't look at policies and review people's accounts and talk to them, my business isn't making money. And if I can't pick up the phone and talk to people, I'm not making money. So, those are two things that we internally, we spend a lot of money on, and making sure, that we've got the right practices and procedures in place as it relates to our IT and our phone systems. I'll save money on paper and staples. But, that the checklist that you put up here is good. And I think that's where, your clients are going to have to work and depend on with you, is talking and making sure that, are we doing certain things, to properly protect this? And if they are, I think that, again, that's going to lead to a reduction in your insurance premiums. And you're also probably going to get, carriers that normally might not insure you, because if you do certain things, that they will now, step in and insure you. Because there's a lot of good policies out there right now. But sometimes people will say, hey, listen, if you don't have, if you aren't doing, two-factor authentication on your email, then we're not going to offer you a quote. So it can, kind of, get in the way of people getting coverage. So, I'm taking myself out as a cyber expert. I'm just telling you, as a business owner, make sure that you properly protect your data, because anyone, if you go and you unplug your computers right now, try to work. In this day and age, it's impossible. So, protecting that data, making sure that you've got the proper practices and procedures in from a network security and even, client, backups and stuff like that is just, it's vital in this day and age.
Yeah, no question. And I think that what, my takeaway as I've been putting all this information together and talking to you and talking to others, talking to our clients, is really kind of the foundation of how we do what we do, which is provide a managed service solution to our clients and really run IT as a proactive, strategic approach. Having the servers protected, having patching in an automated fashion, being set up with monitoring and alerting, making sure that our firmwares are updated timely, antivirus updates are done timely, internet threat protection is done timely, intrusion protection is current, and all of the warranty and support expirations are kept current, dual factor, backups, all this stuff. That's a lot of stuff for people to have to worry about, but from our perspective, it's kind of just it's the norm. This is our standard. This is how we run our clients. So for a lot of our clients, this should be a non-issue. For most of our clients, this should be a non-issue. But I think this is pretty cool to see that historically, there's a big shift, or there's a big sort of chasm between people who have a very reactive perception of IT, and I'll fix it when it breaks, versus a proactive approach of, let me get ahead of it and run it correctly. And I think at the end of the day, what we found out with the cyber liability insurance is their perception is almost concurring what we're doing is, hey, yeah, we can better protect and better insure networks that are run better. It just kind of makes sense. So, that's a pretty cool thing to see.
And the other thing, Craig, not to interrupt you, but the other thing I think a lot of clients need to realize is that just because you're doing their technology for them, a lot of them think that they don't need cyber liability, and it's just not the case. If they get tricked into sending money on a legitimate email, that's not a Craig problem. Or we've seen instances where people will log in from a laptop at home or a network that's not being monitored by you guys, and they'll introduce a virus or introduce some sort of ransomware, and they're shut down. We've also seen instances where a medical client might go to an AMA conference and they leave an unencrypted laptop in the back of an Uber or Lyft. So if you were to look at a cyber pie chart, 43% of the claims are going to come from things like hacks, malware, and viruses. Things that you carry your malpractice insurance for. But 57% of those claims are going to come from things that Craig has nothing to do in providing IT services to your clients. You're not responsible for a rogue employee on their end. You're not responsible for a staff mistake. You're not responsible for a lost or stolen laptop, theft of hardware. There's a myriad of other causes of loss that each and every single one of these clients on this call, they really just need their own cyber policy to address their own negligence.
Right. No, that's great. Because there are those gaps, and one of the things that we talk about a lot, especially around user training, is technology is not going to fix this. It's going to help, right? But it's not 100% cure. So definitely having the cyber liability and being better protected from a business perspective is really what we're talking about here. So that kind of wraps up a lot of our questions at this point. And what we intended to cover. So I kind of wanted to throw it out there and see if anybody had any questions that, based on what we talked about and based on what Justin has covered today, other than the questions people have emailed me over the last couple of weeks. See if anybody has any, wants to raise their hand and ask any questions. Okay, going once. Going twice. Seems like we're cool then. I think, is there a question? I don't know. Let's see. Nope, the question is thanks. Okay. So, yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up at this point. I'd really like to, again, thank Justin. It was awesome to have you on this, and I really appreciate it. And I know it was, as much as I'm kind of aware of what's going on out there, this was certainly very informative for me and filled in a couple more gaps. So, thank you, Justin. Really appreciate your effort and your time here. So very cool of you.
Absolutely. No, it's great to have it. And, if anyone needs anything or they have questions, via you, just, feel free to send them over, and I'd be more than happy to, provide an answer.
Yeah, definitely we will do that.
All right. Well, that wraps out about everything. Our next upcoming webinar in this series will be covering dual factor authentication, what it is, what it does, and if it's something you need. So we hope that you join us for that one. Okay. So we just want to say thank you for everyone that's been attending. We hope that it's been informative and of value to you. We certainly did enjoy putting it on. Please let us know if you have any further questions or if you'd like to talk to Craig or Justin about the specific cyber insurance needs. And for more information about us, please check out our website at www.fpainc.com. Send us an email or even give us a call. And of course, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As we mentioned, our next webinar in the series is going to be covering dual-factor authentication, something that every business should consider. That should be in about a month, so look out for the invitation soon. Thanks again, and have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Justin. We'll talk to you guys soon.
See you. Thanks. Bye.